There we go.
What's up, everybody? Hey, guys. Oh, man, that's totally in the way.
Okay, we talked too long, but we're ready to go finally. We're going to talk today about how to get over the isolation. It's super normal and part of it, right?
Yeah.
You don't need headphones, right?
No.
Okay.
All right. So, let's talk about overcoming isolation. Really interesting things are happening as we're building this platform. We were just talking about this. What we're noticing is we're getting a lot of people listening to our content, really liking what we're doing, but not a ton of people sharing our content. And I think it's pretty obvious why.
There might be a few obvious reasons, right?
Yeah, the name of our podcast is The Betrayed, the Addicted, and the Expert. We talk about sex addiction. And we talk about relationship issues and problems, and people aren't that eager to jump all over social media and Facebook and say, hey, this is what I follow, and
completely.
Yeah. And so but that's reflective of a bigger issue in recovery, both from betrayal and from addiction. And you guys are the pros on not being isolated with your problem. You're definitely out there.
However, don't say that because people are like, annoying. We lived in isolation for most of our marriage.
Okay, right. And so now you're out with it, right? People know you as this couple who's worked through a lot of things. And so there are so many people, like you say, Ashlynn, you lived in isolation for a long time, right? And there's so many people who are in isolation right now, struggling and suffering either with addiction or in a marriage that they've experienced betrayal, but they're all alone. And they might be listening to our podcast. And what we want to talk to today is we want to talk to them and talk to you about what isolation will do to you. How do you break out of that isolation? What risks might you have to take? What you don't have to do to not be isolated. Like, you don't have to have a Facebook page and get a video of your story and all those things. But why it's so important not to be isolated in your recovery. And so to start, why don't we just hear your guys' story a little bit about how you came out. You say you were isolated, Ashlynn. How did you come up and out of this isolation and into more connection in your recoveries?
So I think I want you to, actually, I want to be able to represent this. Like, when we talk isolation, I want to be really specific to give like a real life example from the addict of how I isolated. And I definitely want to hear yours, because I think that people will identify with this for sure. So for me, I pretended that I was fine. I pretended like that the weight of the addiction was not like a big deal, right? And I put on a face, and that was to convince everybody else. I was under no delusion myself, right, about where I was and about the betrayal that Ashlynn was experiencing. Like, I knew for a long time, like in 2003, like once you knew what was up, I was under like no delusion of, and I was painfully aware of my shame, although I didn't know that it was. So I would put on a face for the people. I would be in denial with you, and I would avoid as well. And on top of that,
so Coby, there's this belief that I'm hearing from you, something to the effect of nobody will love me as I am. If they knew everything about me, or who I really was, then they wouldn't love me. And so that's that shame-based belief that pushed you to put on this facade with everybody else. Even though I'm hearing you say deep down you knew that it was as bad as it was. You weren't in denial about that. You didn't want everybody else to see it, right? So.
Well, and
perfectly said.
I will add this: when you say that, it's also the shame of the one who's been betrayed. It's this weird, like, I don't want to tell people what he's done because the shame that will go to him.
Yeah.
Like that protecting. And so I think that's part of it too, is you isolate to protect.
Yes.
Both of yourselves.
Yes, no question. And I think let's get back to the betrayed in a minute, because there's many different reasons why isolation starts to happen. For the addict, what I see a lot of is what you just described, Coby.
Yeah, I would also talk. I would be willing to like own it with like my church leader, like, and I would when I was compelled to have the conversation, or if I felt like really courageous, I would say, yeah, I've had this issue with porn, but you know, I'd be super vague. So I'd be really vague, and I would give as little detail as possible, just to put it on the radar, but with the idea that I don't want to drill down on what this means. So I would really speak kind of cryptically, if you will. And as far as what Ashlynn's concerned is, like, if she didn't talk about it, I never brought it up.
Right.
Like ever. So if we're going to talk about like really isolation is concerned, that's it. And I was also compelled to go to 12-step in 2006. It was not my choice. But when I did go, how I isolated was I didn't do any of the work. I filled a seat, but I was not there.
Right. It's interesting what you're saying. You were compelled to go to 12-step.
Yeah.
So going to 12-step is definitely coming out of isolation.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you actually went to a meeting
True.
where other people could see, like, hey, that Coby guy's here.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you were still in a state of isolation.
Yes,
right?
and he went to 12-step like 30 miles away.
Yeah, why'd you go so far away?
I went across town because I didn't want to see anybody.
Yeah.
But like within a month of going, the dude from my church was in the meeting when I walked in one night. So I was like, oh, sweet. This is the awkward moment of like the century. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, you too? Okay. See you at church on Sunday with your kids and my wife too. You know, it was like, yeah, it was the worst. So I did do that. But even still, as far as like, I don't know, as far as isolation is concerned, before I actually went to 12-step, I would just, and I would also avoid anything hard. Like not just addiction, but I would also avoid any confrontation.
Right. So
because if confrontation came up, then all of a sudden, then this would be thrust on the table.
Anything vulnerable in the relationship, right?
Yeah, to be sure.
So if you could keep everybody, especially Ashlynn, at an arm's length, then you were okay.
Totally.
Right? You can hear that isolation.
I'm going to add something. This is totally maybe off, but we also had totally different friends.
Interesting.
Okay, so our friends were like, they were fun and they were friends, but we never talked about anything vulnerable. They definitely didn't know that part of our story, and I think we almost like repelled people who wanted to be real or who lived a very real life, because it was like, I don't want that, or we don't have that, and we have like a hard marriage, so we can't be friends.
That is totally true. When your friends, they emulate or they reflect back your level of fakeness. And so if you're really fake, then you're going to find some fake friends, right?
Totally.
If you're really disconnected, then you're going to find people who want to be disconnected. And when you're open and you're vulnerable, you're going to find people who want to be open and vulnerable as friends. So that's a good point,
Yeah.
Ashlynn.
We isolated. Yeah, we isolated as a couple, to be sure.
Yeah. Because, okay, so you isolated individually, you isolated as a couple as well, right? Now, Ashlynn, let's talk about you for a minute. This isolation, you say you were caretaking for or protecting him and his shame. Yeah. So that's one reason, is you feel like, well, this isn't my issue, and I don't want to throw it out there to the world because that'll just make him feel bad.
Right. It's
right?
the like episode 25 or 6 that we talked about last week. I love you, I hate you. It's confusing. Like you hate what they're doing, but you also love them and want to protect them.
Right. So you care about them, and you don't want them to go through a lot of judgment of other people, and so you don't want to open up because you're protecting them. Right. What are some other reasons why the betrayed isolates? What were some other reasons why you
I felt like, well, at first I thought, gosh, I must have like, marriage must be like this. Like this must be everyone's way of marriage, that they just don't really connect or not super whatever. And then I came to like, wait, my marriage is hard, and some people's is not hard. I could start to see like,
at least not as hard as yours. Right.
Like maybe mine isn't normal.
Right.
And so then it made me want to isolate even more. Like something's wrong with me.
Right.
Because he's doing this thing. He's connecting with other women. He's watching pornography. He's choosing other people over me.
Right.
Something's wrong with me.
So yeah, you can hear the shame that's triggered.
Totally.
Within you. What is wrong with me? And I don't want anybody to know that my spouse would go do things outside of our marriage.
Absolutely.
Because therefore that there's a problem with me.
And I think because I was that girl who judged people who cheated, I was that girl who judged people who looked at pornography. I mean, it was like, oh yeah, they live in their basement with their mom. Like,
right.
That's right. And then if once a cheater, always a cheater, you leave them.
Right.
I can't believe she stayed, or I can't believe he stayed. And so I was so judgmental, and then it happened.
Then it happened to you, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Oh, the world is not black and white.
Right. And you know what, Ashlynn? One of the reasons you isolated is because you were so judgmental.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And because it just showed how much shame you had around something like that. And so that's one reason is, one, you're protecting him, two, you're embarrassed that it happened to you, and judgmental, right?
I can own it. I was.
It also brings in, for the betrayed, oftentimes I hear this, body image and self-worth issues of, I don't want anybody to know about this because I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough for him, in the bedroom, all of those things, and it's like, I just don't want to share that story because it just means that I'm not enough. Right.
No, I felt like I'm a prude.
I'm a prude, right?
That was my belief. It wasn't, I have never had really body image stuff, but it was like, definitely in the bedroom, I'm a prude.
I'm a prude, so I'm not enough. So,
yeah.
And I don't want anybody else to know that, and know that he's...
That will be the answer. They'll automatically
that's what it'll come down to.
Either Ashlynn's really mean, and that's why he cheated, or she's just not... She doesn't have sex enough or something.
Right. Okay, so you guys are talking about all the fears around opening up, right? So there's all the shame that comes with addiction, Coby. There's all this fear for the betrayed and the shame as well. So why in the world would you do it? And how do you do it?
Meaning, not how do we?
How'd you start to break out of that fear and that isolation?
Yeah, well, I think once again we were compelled.
You were compelled.
No, I was no, because I think really the catalyst to not isolating, the catalyst to coming out. That sounds really funny because this is not a topic on me coming out because I'm gay. This is a topic of me really just sharing with somebody else.
Did you just come out?
Maybe I did. No, but
I will say he had a conversation with a friend that came out, and it was like so identical in the thing. So not gonna
interesting.
It's very similar.
Like super similar because there's.
Well, it would be because there's so much shame and
yeah. So, just to bring it back on topic, I'm not coming out as gay.
Okay.
Like, love those who are, no judgment, right? But in truth, how did I actually say it out loud? I've got this issue, and I remember exactly where I was.
Me too.
We were in therapy with, ironically enough, a certified sex therapist, not a sex addiction therapist, but a certified sex therapist. Ashlynn doesn't remember. She's
no, I do.
The 11th.
I thought we were talking about something else.
Okay, and I just said, because she was trying to explore why Ashlynn might be quote unquote mean to me, and I finally just said, well, you can't find anything, but maybe this is an issue, Ashlynn. I've had an issue with porn and masturbation, and the woman just stopped and she looked with kind of like big eyes towards me. This is exactly it, Coby. So Coby, you go to 12-step. Ashlynn, this is on you. So that's when I came out, but we were compelled there, like we went there because I had my first emotional affair.
Right.
Not my first, the only emotional affair, but I had an emotional affair, and then was caught, and then was pulled in by my church leader, and the church leader said, I said, Ashlynn's mean.
Right.
He sent us to therapy. That's really when it came out. So I guess I'm saying this because it's like I had created a mess because of my isolation, because of my addiction, that compelled me to be in a spot where someone actually said, okay, Coby, this is an issue for you. And I knew it was an issue, but I didn't know it was an addiction.
Interesting.
So, yes, that kind of got you started, but it was still so small. Like he made a couple friends at 12-step, like a couple, and we're still friends with them today, where that was one couple that we felt like we could hang out with them, and we at least knew their truth and they knew our truth. We didn't talk about it, but we knew they were working
they were
on
struggling
stuff.
with similar issues.
But that was the only, that was us coming out of isolation.
Yeah.
We still did not reach out to family. We did not reach out and talk with friends.
We were the classic couple who was compelled to not isolate anymore. Is that fair to say?
Well, and that is such a oxymoron, is being compelled to not isolate. So Because what we're talking about when we talk about not isolating, we're talking about living a more open, vulnerable life. And so when you're compelled or you're being forced to do that, you're still not really being that open. It's like you're being forced to do
that
it.
was
Right?
that was the beginnings. I think when we really started to find that, okay, we're not isolating anymore, was when I found the friends through the Togetherness Project, and I realized I wasn't alone,
Right.
and that really blew my mind.
Right.
And I realized, okay, so there's more women out there who are feeling the way that I feel, and very validating that I'm not crazy, and I've become a person that I don't want to be.
Right.
And I can change.
Right.
And so that kind of opened up my world to, okay, I have a few friends here and there who were mostly through social media. I didn't have still any close friends or family that I was going to.
Right. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she was telling me about, she listens to our podcast, and she was saying, I told my best friend to listen to your podcast, and she listened to episode number 1 or episode number 2, and she broke down crying, and she just said, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one going through this, and someone is actually putting words to what I'm dealing with, and it made her realize I'm not alone, and I can open up and get support and be more honest. Little did she know her best friend was going through the exact same thing, and they didn't know that about each other, and they were best friends, right? This huge thing in their relationship. So it's interesting because a lot of my clients that will start to open up to family or roommates or good friends, they get all kinds of responses. Sometimes they get, parents trying to fix it and make it all right. Sometimes they get really judgmental people who think you're a pervert and you're horrible and what's wrong with your marriage. But usually, when they open up to the right people, the response I hear all the time is, "Oh my gosh, me too. Like, I'm dealing with this issue too." Or, "I know somebody who is, and I'm here to support you, and I love you, and I care about you." And that usually is the response. So, you started to talk a little bit, you guys, about when you weren't compelled, because you haven't always been compelled to open up.
Indeed.
Right? What shifted? What changed?
To where we were not isolating because we were not.
You didn't want to isolate anymore. You wanted to connect.
I'm going to give my answer. You can give yours. Okay, so I feel like that's when I started doing the work when I met these women through Togetherness Project, and we started at Adult Recovery and getting specialized therapy. And we were one-on-one. We were not doing therapy together for the first time in our marriage. And I started connecting with these women. So
and you guys were in groups,
yes,
right? You were a group of women. You were with a group of men.
Yes, I did not do individual therapy.
I did individual.
Yes,
and I did
you need
group.
to be closer. So he did individual, I did group, he did group. And I realized that although our stories were all very different, that we still could connect. And I'm still connected with those women today.
Right.
In different ways, but we're connected. And it's because the vulnerability and showing up and all of those.
So when you got in this setting where there was safety created to talk openly about what was really going on, then you started to realize, oh my gosh, when I do share my story with the people who are supportive, it's not going to kill me, right? I can do this. Was that your experience too, Coby?
Yeah, I mean, it was like super, it was insanely nerve-wracking to actually go to, as much as I wanted to go to Addo and get specialized help, and I knew I had to have it. But I had been to 12-step in 2006, I'd been to 12-step in 2012, or 2013, Ashlynn decided to go for a little bit. But when I actually knew, okay, I'm going to go to Addo and sit and do this with the group, I was scared.
Right.
I was scared. I was nervous. But it's kind of like the nervousness of it, the scared feeling was kind of like a fog. It took me a few weeks to move out of, because I realized that the guys in the group, they were like me.
Right.
And I wasn't alone, and they were safe. So once I got out of that, it took, probably took me 4 weeks ish until I actually was like, cool, I got to go to group, rather than like, okay, I got to muster up some courage and sit in front of these dudes again and like talk about my stuff.
But I remember, I don't know if you remember this, Coby. So I was the guy at Addo who came in and like promoted.
You did the foundations?
Well, so it started with an educational group, and
Okay.
which is like a foundations group. It's a 4-week or 6-week just educational group where you don't have
that
to
was
come.
really so good.
Yeah. Oh, it's a
Your
great
content
way
was legit.
to start recovery. But it's not vulnerable. It's you come in and you learn, and it's like going to a class. And it was my job to promote the actual long-term therapy groups, and I came in to promote it when Coby was in there. And no, it was really good because I was like, hey, we do these psychotherapy groups where we get vulnerable, you get real, you have accountability, you have connection, you have honesty. And almost before I even got done saying anything, you raised your hand and said, and I was like, so if you want to join, and you were like, yes, I'm in, obviously.
Good. I was afraid what you were going to say.
But I tell that story because at that point in the game, Coby, although you didn't know how to open up and be vulnerable and be honest, you were willing. You were saying, okay, it's time. I'm ready to go. I'm willing.
I was.
So.
And I don't know. I think maybe the hardest part about it was walking through the door.
Yes. Just get
once I got in, it was like, okay, and I got it. But also was like, man, I just felt safe. And when so just to speak to the addict and to give a little peek behind the curtain to the betrayed who's listening right now, it is so scary as an addict to acknowledge, even to strangers, and especially to people who may know that you have an issue. It is the scariest thing, because it is the source of all of the shame that I've ever experienced in life.
Mm-hmm.
But going and I've never felt more safe, like in my life, than going there, because I just knew that I wasn't going to be judged, and I wasn't going to be cast out because of all the wrong I had committed.
Right. Yep. The thing that heals addiction and heals betrayal is connection. And so, but you know what sucks about that? It's the scariest thing. It's the last thing that you want to do.
Yeah. So it's like I was holding on to isolation, wasn't it?
You're holding on to isolation, then you realized, oh my gosh, when I open up, I get connected. I don't need my addiction anymore. When the betrayed opens up and gets connected, what you realize is not everybody hurts me, and I can have trust in my relationships again. And I can overcome my shame,
or have some relationships, because now you said that, to have trust in relationships. I didn't have friends who were dudes. I had like the football friends, and I had like casual acquaintances, but I didn't have friends. And I really think, and I'm like a super like extrovert and social guy, but I never let anybody close.
Right.
Because I never wanted anybody to find out. And so one of the things I did do through recovery is emotionally, not just from a relationship way, but I stopped isolating as a friend, and I started to have friends.
Right. And that is what heals your addiction. An addict, there's certain beliefs that they have. One is, nobody will love me as I am. The other is, I can't trust others to meet my needs. And those two things are things that keep you stuck. Because once you start to realize that other people will love you with your flaws, and that other people can meet your needs, that you can't do this on your own, you need connection to heal, that's when you start to heal. So I want to come back to something you said earlier, which, the scariest part was walking through the door, mm-hmm. right? Will Smith has a great, it's on YouTube, it's like a 5-minute clip, and he's talking about skydiving. So YouTube, Will Smith skydiving. And but what he talks about, and he'll tell it much better than I do, but he talks about how he's going skydiving, and for like the 24 hours before, he couldn't sleep that night. He was thinking of how he's going to die and how scared he was and how horrible it was going to be, and so he went through all of this agony. It was just terrible agony, and then he jumped out of the plane, and he realized, I'm out of the plane, so what now? And the wind's hitting his face, and he's falling, and he's just like, it was the most freeing, wonderful, just awesome experience. And he realized all of that pain, all of that fear that he had, really was for naught, because he was jumping out of the plane anyways. And the reality is it's not as scary as you think that it is. When you do it, when you start to open up, start to connect, you're going to find that it's actually quite freeing, and not as shameful as you think that it is.
Yeah.
So,
I always said recovery is one giant leap.
mm-hmm.
The first step is one giant leap, and then like a zillion baby steps.
Yeah.
That's very true.
So we're not talking about. No, you all don't have to start your own platform and have your own podcast. You can. That'd be awesome if you did.
We need more of you.
Yeah. But I was talking to a girl this week, another girl, and she had just written an email to her entire family, because she has a really big family, and she said, I'm tired of being fake with them. Recovery is such a big part of our life, and I just pretend like it's not happening with them. I'm done with that. And she sent that out, and she was saying, we were talking about this in group, and somebody said, does everybody have to do that to get into recovery? And the answer is no. You don't have to share it with the whole world, but everybody does have to connect with somebody to get in recovery. I don't think it's possible to stay completely isolated in what you're going through, both with betrayal or addiction, and find real recovery. Because real recovery comes from being vulnerable. Real recovery comes from being authentic. And if you have this big thing that's happened in your life and you're hiding it from everybody, I don't think you'll ever get there.
Yeah, so what you just said, though, just to clarify this, what you just said was real recovery can't happen without real connection despite your past.
Despite the shame, right.
Despite your previous choices, despite the addiction, despite the betrayal. And really what that means as well, drawing down another level, is real connection, real recovery is going to happen when real connection happens, when people see the real you.
Right. So this doesn't mean you have to go find your gossip monger aunt that loves to just gossip to everyone and say, hey, I got to tell you because I got to tell everybody, right? But it does mean your closest friends, your maybe your siblings that you really trust.
And I will say too is that it's likely the people that you're afraid the most to share this with are the people who will rally around you the most,
because it's most vulnerable.
Yes,
to share with them.
And when I say rally, that's different for everybody. You might have someone who's just like who all of a sudden their concern for you all of a sudden ticks up, and maybe they send a more consistent text to you. Mm-hmm. Or you might have somebody else who addresses the issue like head on. Hey, tell me what recovery looks like for you. Like what's that been like? But the point is that you'll find people will love and accept you more than what you think. And if you're ever thinking worst case scenario, you gotta remember that's only a byproduct of isolation and shame.
Right.
Meaning worst case scenario, like the total rejection, the loss of friendships, all those things, that's simply just from the fear of worst case scenario. And nothing good in life ever happened when we were thinking of worst or motivated by worst case scenario.
Right, it's true. I was up at the college teaching a lesson, and I was talking about openness and vulnerability and facing what is. And at the very end of the lesson, this guy stands up, and I was talking about connection too. He stands up and he says, hey, I want you all to know that I have this problem, and if any of you struggle with it too, I'm here to support you, and you can come talk to me. And I was just kind of like, whoa, that lesson went well. Like, I got my point across. And, does everybody have to be like him? No. But you know what? I wish everybody were. Because if we were, then all this shame around these issues would dissipate, and everybody would be healthier together. And so...
Yeah, I think, Ashlynn, I want to ask you to share what your notion was about going to church and everybody having their own signs.
Oh,
which
yeah.
is just kind of like a physical manifestation of coming out of isolation.
Right. I wish we could go to church and everyone wears a name tag around their neck saying, like, this is my struggle, because I think there would be more empathy and true Christianity if you're a Christian, if that were the case. I just wanted to say also, we talk about shame so much, especially on this episode, but a lot of people don't even understand, well, now how do I get over all that?
Right.
And so for me, that's where for both of us, I think, because we chose to share so publicly, there was a lot of work done on shame resiliency.
Yes.
And we did this.
Prior to.
Right. And when Coby asked me he said, I want to share this openly, I was very, like, I think over and over I kept saying, but Brene Brown says that you shouldn't share your story if you're afraid of the result.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're not okay with people not liking you, not accepting you,
right.
You're not ready. And so I just kept saying, are you okay with that? Are you okay if people unfriend you on Facebook, or if they unfriend you in real life? And he was like, I don't care. Like, he
right.
truly wanted to help people see that you can change.
Right.
And I think that is the biggest part. We're not talking about sharing openly, but if you are choosing to share openly, make sure that your shame resilience is high.
And I would say that the big catalyst behind that, sharing like that on such a public platform in such a way, many people have said, man, that took so much courage, but it had nothing to do with courage. It had nothing to do with courage. It had everything to do with my shame resilience, because it didn't, like, sharing did not require courage. It wasn't because if it's courage, if it's courage, you're weighing all of a sudden courage.
It's vulnerable.
And fear.
You weren't in fear.
Well, we've heard people share their story with courage,
right,
deep in shame. They didn't.
Right.
They can't even say I look at porn because it's so shameful.
Right.
But they're sharing their story in a courageous way.
So that takes a lot of courage to be able to do that for someone who's just not sure how people are going to react. But for me, it wasn't a matter of okay, in order for me to not be afraid, I have to have courage. Take fear and courage out of the conversation completely. It had everything to do with I knew who I was, and I was confident in who I am.
So who cares what they think about you?
So
it's just, this is your story.
This is motivated from a place of, I know how dark and isolated that place can be.
Right.
But I know how much brighter, how exponentially brighter hope can be for someone who's in that dark place. So we're going to share this. So again, had nothing to do with courage, had everything to do with shame resilience. And honestly, that really came from me forgiving myself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where it comes from. You know, you both of you guys are just amazing examples of shame resiliency. And I think that's why a lot of people connect to you. Because what you talk about is very vulnerable. And to open up about your story the way that you do, like we keep saying, everybody doesn't have to do that.
Yeah.
But notice what happens when you do. When you are as open as you guys are. One, you get connection from people on a real level. Two, I imagine your recoveries are so blessed by being this open and talking this freely about it, right? That there's no bit of continued isolation and shame there, pushing or driving an addiction or the betrayal trauma, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, that's true. And I don't think we probably talk about it in those terms, although you just did. That's not part of the conversation that Ashlynn and I have. But it's really just a matter of, I don't know, helping. It's a matter of just, like, this person needs help. They need hope.
I think, we do live in a different way of recovery because nothing is off topic for us. Like, we can have a normal conversation together that would be extremely hard for most people.
Right.
But it's normal for us.
Right.
And it wouldn't have been normal for us 5 years ago.
Right.
Not even.
But it's
not even close.
Not even.
Yeah, could you imagine coming in for this episode 5 years ago?
This would not have
We would not have shown up.
But I think that's exactly why people need to have hope that despite where they are right now, they can recover from betrayal and from addiction, but both can also recover from the shame of betrayal and the shame of addiction. And again, like you said, and you've repeated, it doesn't need to be this big public platform, but you can really own the fact that you've changed, and you can feel secure and be full of self-love and compassion.
All right, so this is what I want our audience to do, okay? I challenge you guys, if you are in this position, if you're listening to this as the addict and you haven't opened up to anybody. Or if you're the betrayed and you're stuck and isolated in your marriage and don't know what to do, just start with one person this week. Sit down, think it through. Who is the safest person for you to share your story with? And then just share your story. Just start there and open up. And say, you said earlier, the things that you're most afraid of, say those things to that person. Yeah. And then let them know that you just need support. You need somebody to love you. You need somebody to just hear you.
And it could be just like, when you say support, it could be like, when you're really specific, Larry, I'm going to share some with you, and all I need you to do is just listen and then not run for the hills.
Seriously, like just hear me. Like I love the name Larry.
Yeah. But that's it. I think you can be that prescriptive with this person that you trust the most. Because if you trust them the most, you can probably trust that they're not going to be like Larry and run for the hills, right?
Right.
I'm going to add, when I decided to share, I found someone who I viewed as the least judgmental person. So, like, go look at their Facebook. Like, you know these people, right?
Right.
If they're posting things that are judgmental, they're probably not the person you want to tell. When I did tell a friend who I didn't judge it accurately enough, there was a lot of judgment that came.
Right.
And so
Yes.
I just told the wrong person.
Right. That's a good point. And you know what? We have that internal gauge of, like, are they safe or not? And if you think about it and there's nobody in your life that's safe, then go create that safe person. And it might be on your own, you end up at a 12-step group and try to meet some people that you can be vulnerable with. Or you just try to find those people in your life because they are out there. Supportive, loving, helpful people are out there for you.
And I'm going to add, if you're going to go to those 12 steps, make sure you stay after because there is no crosstalk and connection during 12 steps.
That's true. That's true. Or it's a therapy group, like where you guys found it, right?
You'll find connection in.
Yeah. So
have hope. Have hope that on the other side of this really scary thing of sharing, that there's support and there's love despite the things that you've loathed the most about yourself.
Jump out of that plane and enjoy the wind on your face a little bit. Right?
That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so guys, we want you to share this, but Ashlynn has a new idea on how you can share this if you don't want to post this on your personal Facebook page for fear of people outing yourself.
Definitely. You can always share things privately. You can, especially our podcast is no one knows who you're following us or sharing or even leaving reviews.
Meaning like in a Facebook message.
If you want to send it in a Facebook message or even a direct message on Instagram, it can be done.
We've had people say like, oh my gosh, I want to share that episode with my friends. I don't even think they're struggling with betrayal or addiction, but they need to hear that. How do I do that? And I think, one, you do what we've talked about in this podcast today, which is own your story and share it anyways.
Yeah.
Or two, do what Ashlynn just said. So,
totally. Because really,
you can still own it in a private way.
Yeah,
you can own it in a private way. But I think having that challenge from Brandon, I think that was a super appropriate challenge because there can be a lot of people who can sleep easier tonight having listened to this.
Yep. Awesome. All right, you guys. See ya.
Brandon, man.
Bye, guys.